At the Magnes, there's a good chance you have a connection to the human stories collected, preserved, and archived there. In fact, the story of the Magnes would be nothing without you. The common thread that runs through all of our shared experiences has been the focus of the museum from the beginning. It was the 1960s when the college students and residents of Berkeley, California were at the forefront of an intense political and cultural debate that would define a generation of Americans. Among those independent thinkers were Seymour and Rebecca Fromer, who set out to create a Jewish museum that would embody the character of the West and reflect the Jewish diaspora around the world through its programs and exhibitions.
Seymour Fromer, the director, also was very involved with maintaining and caring for the preservation of synagogues and cemeteries in Northern California. So it wasn't just what was going on in the museum, it was what was going on in the community. And people were kind of brought in order to deepen the relationship with the community itself.
This is Deborah Kaufman. She started the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival while she was working at the Magnes back in the 1980s. She also has a personal story stitched into the fabric of the Western Jewish History Center at the Magnes.
My family realized that my stepmother's archives were really kind of emblematic of a life of a Jew in the 20th century. She was born in Germany at the turn of the century, lived in Weimar period Germany, was a refugee from Hitler in a transit camp, and finally, by a miracle, got a visa to the United States with her then husband, who had been very involved with the champagne business, and luckily was able to come to the West Coast and renew a life here. And I think somebody like Edith Schonberger Kaufman's archives really help us understand in greater depth the extent to which Jewish women were very much involved with the history of our people, but also with the rebuilding of a Jewish culture, both in the United States as well as in Israel after the war. The value of an archive like the one here at the Magnes Museum is that people long into the future will have access to material about the past, and that they will have the actual materials. It won't just be written histories, but it'll be the correspondence in the handwriting. It'll be the things that people held in their hands, the prayer books, the pens, all the ephemera of people's lives, the photographs that have been touched and taken by real individuals. And it's the reality of these things that makes the past come alive and makes it valuable for us to understand our own present and the future too.
For the first 50 years, the Magnes served its community in an old brick house. Tucked away behind a band of oak trees, it often required discovering it to become aware of the vital work that was going on there. Here's Lawrence Rinder, the director of the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive.
I first learned about the Magnes Museum when I was living in this neighborhood. I had an apartment over on Stewart Street, and I would wander around the neighborhood on the weekends and stumbled across this very strange and wonderful place.
At first, Larry was drawn in by the extraordinary exhibitions that put on display one of the finest collections of Judaica in the world. But like so many people who dig below the surface, Larry's interest became personal.
Not only was the Magnes an interesting discovery for me and a real treasure trove of cultural riches, but it was personally meaningful to me because my family has roots here in the Bay Area. And so, although I wasn't aware that any material related to my family was here, I felt a connection, and I was glad that someone was keeping track of the history of the Jewish community in California.
Larry's path would wind up back at the museum years later. His story is like the ultimate Magnes experience, but it gets to the core of the Magnes' reach that goes far beyond the gallery walls of the museum.
I was approached by Alla Efimova, who was the curator here at that time, and she mentioned to me that the Magnes held the archives of my grandfather, Reuben Rinder, who was the cantor at Temple Emmanuel between 1915 and the early 1960s. I thought everything that there was of his, I had or my brother had. And I was very surprised to find out that the Magnes has a remarkable collection of correspondence between my grandfather and cantors throughout the world, as well as correspondence between him and leading musicians, composers of his day. And Alla asked me if I would do an exhibition based on this material, and I couldn't imagine what that would be. So the first step was to come here and find out what was present in the archive.
What Larry discovered was a window into his family's past. His grandfather's unique Californian story would eventually be recontextualized when Rinder connected with Persian Jewish composer Shorokh Yadagari. Cantor Rinder's priestly benediction was based on an ancient Jewish prayer, which Yadagari recomposed and remixed, and a sound-based installation was born. This is all part of a series at the Magnes where artists, critics, and curators are invited to shed new light on objects from the museum's collections and archives. It's artists' projects and exhibitions like this that echo long-standing traditions at the Magnes. A bridge between generations, the museum spans time and cultural boundaries to provide its exhibitions, programs, and community gatherings. Dedicated to creating digital albums about family and community history, Memory Lab is the museum's interactive space where visitors are encouraged to participate. The museum's extensive resources can also be accessed from anywhere in the world online at magnes.org. The whole idea is to connect people with all the elements of culture, the arts, history, politics, religious and secular traditions. On the one hand, this is to affirm community, but then on the other, it's to completely redefine it. This allure of a healthy exchange between different ethnic and religious groups brings up powerful memories for Sara Levi. She grew up on the small Greek island of Rhodes, where a multicultural community thrived before the war.
Then there were the Greeks and the Turkish and the Italians. So we have the Spanish Jews over there had three cultures to deal with. And naturally, they learned the language by living together with them. So we were fortunate. I was born in 1914, so it was the war, the first war was over. But then I remember 1933, when someone from Austria came to Rhodes in a little boat saying, there is a dictator in Germany, Hitler, and that will be a bad sign for the Jewish people who live here or everywhere. We didn't know anything about the outside world.
Sara describes her parents' decision to put her on a boat bound for the United States as a miracle. The impending war proved to be tragic for Sara's parents and many other members of her family, but a dowry chest that accompanied her on her journey west was a powerful symbol of the hope her parents had for securing their daughter's future in the New World.
It was the last night before we were going to leave for the 15 days on the ocean liner to go to New York. The Italians, they said, you come in our table because you speak Italian, stay with us. And I don't know, they asked questions, what's in that trunk that you have? My mother put everything in that trunk, filled it. I mentioned a dress that my parents borrowed because it's an expensive one. The captain of the ship sent a young boy to go take the key, open the trunk, see what there is in there. There is something with gold. Get it out from there and close the trunk. And then the captain said, you're going to wear this dress because it's the last night and you're going to dance with the Italians here and enjoy it before you go to America. And they did. I visualized when I wore that in the ocean liner. Oh my God. I'm embarrassed to cry. I lost not only my family, teachers, aunts, uncles, nephews, everybody. And it's not easy to cope with it in life. And when you look at the dress, it was so beautiful. I couldn't believe my mother had an idea to give me this dress. And that is why when I think of Magnes, I think of, oh, I'm glad something is alive there, something that belonged.
Sara Levi and her wedding dress do have a special place at the Magnes. And so does Lawrence Rinder and his vision for cross-cultural collaborations. Deborah Kaufman and her family heirlooms have a place. And so do you. Come a little closer and find out for yourself at the Magnes.